Get out. You don't belong in first class. The sentence cracked across the cabin like a whip. No hesitation, no whisper. It was thrown into the air for every passenger to hear, and the silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The flight attendant stood tall in navy blue, finger stabbing at the man in seat 2 amperes like a judge passing sentence. Behind her, the captain loomed with folded arms, his expression carved in stone. And further down the aisle, 2 airport security officers appeared, dark uniforms filling the narrow space, a threat in human form. But Marcus Carter didn't move. Black t-shirt, dark jeans, no Rolex, no designer briefcase, just stillness. His gaze lifted to meet hers, calm, anchored, unreadable. Around him, first class had stopped breathing. A woman clutched her pearls. A businessman froze with his phone half raised. In row 4, a blonde passenger angled her camera just enough to capture it all, the red dot on her screen glowing like a warning light. "Sir," the captain said, voice flat and practiced, "either comply or you'll be escorted off." Marcus blinked once, slow. He extended his boarding pass between 2 fingers, clean and crisp. The ink was fresh, the seat assignment clear. 2 amperes, first class, paid in full. The attendant didn't even glance. She snatched it, ripped it down the middle, and let the pieces flutter to the floor like torn paper money. "Not valid," she hissed. "You'll take economy, or you'll take nothing." A ripple of unease spread through the cabin. Someone muttered. He showed her the ticket. Another whispered, "This feels wrong." Phones began to rise higher, quiet witnesses turning into a jury. Marcus stayed silent, no protest, no raised voice. His stillness carried more weight than shouting ever could. The attendant leaned closer, voice sharp enough to cut skin. "People like you always try this. Fake cards, fake passes. Not today." That phrase landed like a gavel. People like you. It wasn't about tickets anymore. The blonde passenger in row 4 whispered to her phone, "This is discrimination." Her stream was live now, comments racing across the screen faster than the plane could ever fly. The captain's jaw tightened. He stepped forward. "Last warning. Stand up or you're coming off this aircraft." Marcus's hands remained folded on his lap. His silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. And then memory flickered. Years ago, a different gate. A clerk scanning his slacks and button down, then shaking his head. Not the image we're looking for. That rejection had burned into him. Back then he left, but not today. Today he was Marcus Carter. Not the kid turned away. Not the man doubted at every checkpoint. Today he was the owner in plain clothes, a storm hidden in silence. He reached for his phone, slow, deliberate. His thumb hovered above one name. One call would tilt this cabin on its axis. But he didn't press yet. He let the insult hang in the recycled air, let the witnesses absorb it, let the silence grow teeth. Because storms don't start with thunder, they start with pressure. And the pressure in first class was rising. Marcus Carter had planned this flight with precision. No entourage, no private jet, no luxury watch ticking on his wrist. Just a plain boarding pass, a black t-shirt, and silence. He wanted to see for himself if the rumors were true, if Horizon Airlines still treated passengers not by their ticket but by their image. Now, in seat 2 amperes, that silence was being tested. The shredded boarding pass lay scattered on the carpet like confetti from a party no one wanted to attend. The attendant stood over him, chest heaving with the kind of confidence that comes from assuming the cabin will back her no matter what. Behind her, the captain's posture grew firmer. His voice dropped an octave, controlled but edged with threat. "This is your last warning." The aisle felt tighter, narrower, suffocating. Security edged closer, hands hovering near utility belts. Passengers leaned in, whispering to each other. A young woman clutched her toddler, shifting uncomfortably. A man in row 5 whispered, "He hasn't even raised his voice." But perception was already stacked against him. Dark skin, dressed down, no signals of wealth to buffer judgment. To them, Marcus looked like a trespasser in his own seat. The attendant smirked, turning to her colleague. "Looks fake. We've seen this before." Her words weren't quiet. She wanted the cabin to hear, and they did. A wave of murmurs rippled across the rows. Some nodded, some frowned, some lifted phones higher. The witness in row 4 muttered louder into her live stream. "He showed ID. He showed his ticket." And they still ripped it up. The comments on her feed scrolled faster. "This is insane. Racism. I'd sue." Don't let them drag him out. Marcus remained still. Stillness was his armor. His silence wasn't absence, it was control. The captain leaned in. Sir, people paid for these seats. We won't tolerate deception. Deception. That word carried the weight of accusation heavier than any seatbelt. Marcus let it sit in the air, unchallenged, while memories surfaced again. His 20s, applying for an airline job, told bluntly he wasn't the right image. His 40s, negotiating billion-dollar deals, still walking into rooms where no one expected him to be the man signing checks. Different uniforms, same doubt. Now those doubts stood over him in navy and stripes, convinced they held the power. A passenger 2 rows back couldn't hold it anymore. This is wrong, he said loudly. He's calm. He showed his pass. You can't just throw him out. The words cracked the tension, a small fracture in the wall of silence. Phones tilted toward the aisle. Security hesitated. But the crew doubled down. The attendant snapped. Stay out of this. Policy is policy. Her voice echoed, sharp and brittle, as if saying it louder made it true. Marcus lowered his gaze, hands folding together in his lap. He breathed once, slow, deliberate. Then he reached for his phone again, because storms don't wait, they build. And the cabin was about to feel the first strike. The attendant didn't hesitate. She stepped closer, closing the distance until her shadow stretched across Marcus's lap. The shredded halves of his boarding pass still clung to the carpet at her feet. Security, she barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through the hum of the cabin. Remove him, now. The officers shifted forward, heavy boots echoing against the narrow aisle. Passengers gasped. Phones tilted higher, a dozen red recording lights flickering like warning beacons. Marcus didn't move. His hands stayed folded, his body anchored. His calm was almost louder than her shouting. The captain stepped in, jaw tight, voice booming. You're obstructing flight operations. Stand up, or you will be physically removed. Gasps spread again. A child whimpered. The woman with the pearls pressed her hand to her mouth. A man in row 6 muttered, He's just sitting there. But the humiliation wasn't finished. The attendant leaned in, her tone dripping with venom. You're not fooling anyone. People like you sneak into first class with fake papers, not dressed like that. Not with that face. That last line landed heavy. Not with that face. The cabin shifted. Silence didn't mean agreement anymore. It meant shock. A few passengers looked away, ashamed. Others raised their phones higher, as if determined to capture every syllable. From row 4, the live stream witness spoke up, louder now. She just said it. You all heard her. This is discrimination. The attendant spun, pointing sharply. Stop recording or you'll be removed too. But it was too late. The clip was already live. Thousands of eyes outside this cabin were watching, flooding the stream with outrage. Unbelievable. Fire her. This man deserves justice. The captain motioned again to security. Detain him. OC. One officer reached forward, hand extended toward Marcus's shoulder. The cabin collectively held its breath. Marcus raised his eyes slowly, locking them on the officer's face. His voice, calm but cutting, broke the silence. Touch me again, and you'll regret it beyond this cabin. The officer froze not from belief, but from the force in his tone. Authority pressed against authority, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to stall. Still, the crew pressed harder. The attendant yanked a handset from the wall, her voice loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Dispatch, this is Horizon Flight 623. Passenger in first class is refusing orders. Possible fraud. Possible threat. Fraud. Threat. The words weren't warnings. They were weapons. Phones caught it all. A ripple of outrage rolled through the rows. A businessman muttered, She's lying. A young woman shouted, He's calm. He hasn't done anything. But the crew didn't stop. They doubled down, their certainty masking their fear. And in the middle of it all, Marcus Carter sat motionless, a storm compressed into silence, waiting for the exact moment to strike. The cabin had become a courtroom. Every row was a jury box, every phone a witness stand. The charge against Marcus was loud and clear. Fraud, threat, trespass. Words stacked like bricks meant to wall him out. But Marcus Carter wasn't built to be walled out. He was built to break walls down. He lifted his phone, slow and deliberate, as if the weight of it could shift the air. A simple black rectangle, but in his hand it was a gavel. He tapped once. A voice answered instantly. Crisp, efficient. Rachel speaking. Marcus didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. His words slid through the tension like a blade. Log this. Horizon Airlines, Flight 623. First-class crew has escalated into racial misconduct. Alert the board. The attendant froze mid-sentence. The captain's head tilted. Passengers blinked, whispering. A few knew that name, Rachel Harris, executive assistant to someone important. But they didn't know how important. Not yet. Rachel's voice carried steady through his speaker. Understood. I've timestamped the incident and flagged the live streams. Corporate legal is on standby. The murmur in the cabin deepened. Phones caught every syllable. A teenager whispered, "He's not bluffing." The attendant scoffed, trying to reclaim ground. "Cute trick. Calling your girlfriend to scare us?" She laughed, brittle and forced. But Marcus didn't flinch. He leaned back, phone still to his ear. "Rachel," he said calmly, "initiate Horizon Protocol 6. Board alert. Full documentation. Every word spoken since boarding." Gasps rippled. Protocol 6. Even without knowing what it was, the phrase carried weight, corporate language, systemic power, not something a random passenger would know. Rachel replied, sharper now. "Confirmed. Protocol 6 is active. All crew actions and audio are being logged in real time. Compliance board notified." The captain's eyes narrowed. He shifted his stance, arms uncrossing, voice lower but edged. "Who exactly are you?" Marcus didn't answer. Not yet. Silence was still his weapon. Instead, he looked around the cabin. The passengers weren't silent anymore. A woman near the galley whispered. He said bored. A man in row 6 muttered, "He's got connections." Phones kept filming, comments exploding. "Bored? He's high up. This is bigger than a seat." The attendant slammed the handset back into its cradle. Her words snapped, desperate now. "You're still a liar. Protocols don't save fakes." But her confidence cracked. Everyone saw it. Marcus lowered his phone, folding it calmly in his hand. His voice, measured but sharper now, cut through the air. "I asked for nothing but my seat. You gave me humiliation. That choice is on you. And now, it's recorded forever." Silence swept the cabin again, but this silence was different. It wasn't complicity. It was anticipation. The storm was shifting, turning, gathering behind him. And for the first time since the flight began, the crew realized they might not be in control anymore. The silence was brittle now, like glass waiting to shatter. Every passenger leaned forward, phones raised, eyes locked on the man in seat 2 amperes. The crew had thrown everything at him. Humiliation, accusations, threats. And yet, Marcus Carter sat calm, steady, phone resting loosely in his hand like a verdict not yet spoken. The captain stepped closer, voice low but firm. "Enough. Identify yourself, or you're leaving this aircraft." Marcus's gaze rose slowly, steady as stone. He let the words hang in the air, heavy with the arrogance of authority. Then, with deliberate calm, he stood. His frame filled the narrow aisle, commanding without raising his voice. "You want to know who I am?" His tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The stillness in it was sharper than shouting. He turned slightly, not just to the captain, not just to the crew, but to the cabin, to the witnesses, to the phones. "My name is Marcus Carter," he said. "CEO, investor, 25% owner of Horizon Airlines." Gasps ripped through the rows like turbulence shaking the fuselage. A woman clutched her chest. A man lowered his phone only to whisper, "Oh my God." The witness in row 4 nearly dropped hers, whispering into the live stream, "He owns the airline. The airline." The attendant's smirk drained into silence. Her lips parted, but no sound followed. The captain blinked, posture faltering. Even the security officers hesitated, their hands lowering from their belts. Marcus didn't stop. His words flowed calm, deliberate, a quiet storm breaking open. "You tore up my boarding pass. You called me a fraud. You told me I didn't belong, in a seat I paid for, on a plane owned by the company I built." Phones caught every word, passengers frozen in disbelief. A businessman muttered, "He's serious." A teenager whispered to her mother, "He's on Forbes. I've seen him before." Marcus took one small step forward, his presence expanding beyond the aisle. "The problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated someone you thought was nobody." It was a mic drop without needing a mic. The words slammed harder than any raised voice. The attendant's face flushed pale. She stammered, that can't be true. But her denial wavered, brittle as paper. The live stream chat exploded. He owns Horizon. Fire them now. This is justice. The captain's jaw tightened, but the authority in his posture had drained away. He wasn't commanding anymore. He was calculating, cornered. And Marcus? He stood calm in the aisle, the quiet center of a storm that had just turned against them. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The words, CEO owner, Horizon Airlines, still echoed in the pressurized cabin, heavier than the roar of jet engines. Then the silence broke not from the crew, not from security, but from the passengers. It started with a single clap. Row 4, the woman who had been live streaming, rose slightly in her seat and brought her hands together. Sharp, defiant, applause in a place where silence had reigned. Another joined, then another. Soon the sound rippled through the rows like a current, a wave of hands slapping together, voices rising. That's right, we saw it. He owns this airline. The crew froze. The attendant's face drained of color, her hands twitching at her sides. She glanced at the captain, but his authority had cracked. He looked less like a leader and more like a man caught in a spotlight he couldn't escape. Security shifted uneasily. They weren't hired to drag CEOs off planes. Their eyes flicked between Marcus and the passengers, every phone now raised like 100 tiny spotlights. A businessman in row 6 stood up. I saw everything, he said, voice clear, steady. He showed his ticket. He stayed calm. You humiliated him. He turned toward the crew. You lied. On record, on live stream. The witness in row 4 added, thousands are watching this right now. The world knows what you did. 7. The attendant shook her head, her voice cracking. This isn't real. He's bluffing. But her words carried no weight anymore. They dissolved under the sound of clapping, under the truth written in every recording, under the storm Marcus had unleashed without raising his voice. Marcus didn't move. He didn't need to. The cabin had moved for him. Passengers leaned into the aisle, some standing fully, forming a quiet wall of human resistance between Marcus and the officers. A teenager lifted his phone higher and shouted, Say it again! He's the CEO! The crew's composure unraveled in real time. The captain's lips pressed tight, his eyes darting. The attendant's smirk had vanished, her voice trembling as she whispered, We didn't know. Marcus finally broke his silence, his voice calm but cutting, each word deliberate. You didn't need to know who I was. All you needed was decency, and you failed. Tim. The applause grew louder, now uncontainable, filling the cabin with a rhythm stronger than authority. The crew stood trapped in their own uniforms, pale and powerless, while Marcus Carter stood still in the aisle, the quiet center of a storm that had completely shifted. The applause subsided into a heavy silence, the kind that felt less like quiet and more like judgment. Every eye in the cabin was fixed on Marcus Carter. The man they had just learned wasn't a trespasser, but the very owner of the airline. Marcus lifted his phone again. His voice remained calm, measured. Rachel, he said evenly. Escalate. Full review. Initiate termination protocol for Horizon Flight 623 crew. The words weren't loud, but they landed like thunder. Passengers gasped. Phones jerked closer. The attendant stumbled back a step, her face pale as frost. Termination. You can't. Her protest died the moment Rachel's voice rang out from the speaker, crisp and deliberate. Understood. Confirmed. Crew credentials will be locked immediately. The captain blinked, confused. Then his badge at his hip gave a single sharp buzz. He looked down. The small green light turned red, his access gone. One by one, the crew felt it. The attendant's handheld device beeped, screen flashing, access denied. Another attendant near the galley fumbled with her ID card, only to see the same scarlet warning. It spread like wildfire, authority evaporating in real time. Passengers leaned forward, whispering, He really can do this. A man muttered, That's corporate-level control. The captain's voice cracked, desperation breaking through his professional shell. This isn't how it works. Marcus finally stepped into the aisle, his presence steady, immovable. He didn't raise his tone, but his words carried like a verdict. You humiliated me in my own cabin. You accused me of fraud, called me a threat, tore up my ticket. This ends now. The attendant's lips trembled. She turned to the passengers as if searching for support, but the cabin was already against her. A child whispered, They're fired. Rachel's voice returned, clear and cutting. Captain, attendant, senior crew all locked out of Horizon's system. Effective immediately. Authority rescinded. The captain's face went white. His hands shook as he tried his badge again, but the red light only blinked faster, mocking him. Gasps filled the air, some mixed with applause, others with disbelief. A passenger muttered, "Justice, right here, right now." Security officers glanced at each other, uneasy. They were no longer escorting a passenger. They were standing in front of the man who controlled the very airline that paid their contracts. One of them slowly lowered his hand from his belt and stepped back. Marcus looked at them, calm but absolute. "Stand down." They obeyed without hesitation. The cabin wasn't tense anymore. It was charged alive with the realization that the balance of power had shifted completely, and Marcus Carter stood at the center, quiet, controlled, dismantling an entire flight crew without raising his voice. The cabin erupted. Applause crashed like waves, louder this time, no longer cautious but full-throated, a roar of vindication. Some passengers rose halfway from their seats, clapping hard, voices carrying above the hum of the engines. "They're locked out. He really did it. That's justice." The live stream witness panned her phone across the aisle, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "You're watching this live crew just got terminated in real time. Their badges turned red. This is happening now." The comments on her stream flew so fast they blurred. "Finally, someone with power fights back. Fire them all. Horizon must respond." The lead attendant's composure shattered. Her voice pitched high, desperate. "This isn't fair. We were following policy." A businessman in row 6 barked back immediately. "Policy? I watched you tear up his ticket. I watched you call him a fraud. That's not policy, that's profiling." The captain tried to salvage ground, his tone cracking under pressure. We didn't know who he was." A middle-aged woman near the window shot up from her seat. "You didn't need to know who he was. You needed to treat him like a paying customer, like a human being." Her words struck like a hammer. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the cabin. "Exactly. She's right. We all saw it." The younger attendant by the galley, face pale, hands trembling, spoke without permission. "I checked the manifest this morning. Marcus Carter's name was on it. First class. Verified." The lead attendant spun on her, furious. "Stay out of this!" But it was too late. The truth had landed. Passengers gasped. Someone muttered, "So they knew." Another, "She ignored it on purpose." The live stream zoomed in on Marcus, calm, centered, phone still in his hand. The narrator's voice carried over the chat. "He doesn't even need to argue. The whole plane is arguing for him." The captain's authority crumbled further. He looked around, lost, as if the walls of the cabin themselves had closed in. His voice shrank. We made a mistake." The businessman snapped. "A mistake is spilling coffee. What you did was public humiliation." The lead attendant's hands shook as she tried to speak again. I thought," but her words dissolved, useless against the avalanche of witnesses. Marcus didn't move. He let the weight of silence press down until her excuses withered. Then he spoke, calm and final. "You thought prejudice was policy. That's the only mistake you made." The applause returned, harder, sharper, echoing through the pressurized cabin like thunder rolling across the sky. And the crew, once so confident, so certain now, stood small in their uniforms, trapped in the wreckage of their own arrogance. The applause faded into a charged silence, every passenger waiting for what Marcus Carter would say next. The crew clung to their last scraps of authority, but their eyes betrayed them. Fear had already taken root. Marcus lifted his phone again. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Rachel," he said evenly, "connect legal. Full escalation." The cabin stiffened. Passengers leaned forward, phones trembling in their hands. The live stream witness whispered into her mic, "He's escalating to corporate legal. This is it." Rachel's voice came through, sharp and steady. "Corporate counsel is on the line. Authorization required." Marcus spoke without looking at the crew. "Authorization, Carter. Begin incident audit. All footage, all witness accounts, all crew statements. Lock it under legal seal." Gasps swept the cabin. A businessman muttered, "He just opened a case in real time." The captain stepped forward, voice shaking now. "Wait, please. This doesn't have to go that far." Marcus turned his gaze on him, steady as stone. "It already has." The lead attendant broke. her voice desperate. "We were only doing our jobs." "No," Marcus cut in, his tone precise as a blade. "You were abusing your jobs. You were enforcing prejudice, not policy, and now you'll answer for it." The young attendant by the galley stepped closer, eyes darting nervously. "He's right. I saw the name. I knew it. I said nothing." Her voice cracked. "I can't stay silent anymore." The cabin shifted, murmurs swelling. Passengers applauded her courage. Someone whispered, "Finally, someone from the inside." "How?" Marcus nodded once, not unkindly. "The silence of witnesses is how injustice survives. Today, that silence ends." Phones caught it all, passengers whispering, "That line. Wow." The captain tried again, his voice shrinking. "Mr. Carter, surely there's a way to resolve this quietly." Marcus stepped into the aisle, his presence filling the narrow space. His words carried like a verdict. "Quiet is how you've buried this for years. But today, the cabin is my courtroom, and every passenger is a witness." A roar of applause erupted, echoing like a gavel. Rachel's voice returned. Legal audit initiated. Crew records flagged for investigation. Credentials permanently revoked. The lead attendant's shoulders collapsed. She whispered, barely audible, "My career. It's over." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence, the applause, the cameras, everything around them had already delivered the judgment. And at 30,000 feet, Horizon Flight 623 was no longer just a journey, it was justice in motion. The cabin was alive now, no longer a quiet, pressurized tube, but a stage where justice played out in real time. Phones hovered high like torches. Applause rolled in waves. Passengers shouted words that cut deeper than any reprimand. "We saw everything." "He stayed calm while you humiliated him." "No more excuses." The lead attendant's hands shook so violently she dropped her pen. It clattered onto the carpet, loud in a space where every sound mattered. She bent to pick it up but froze under the dozens of lenses recording her every move. Her uniform, once a badge of authority, now looked like a costume stripped of meaning. The captain slumped against the bulkhead, his once firm jaw slack, his voice gone. His silence wasn't control anymore, it was collapse. And the passengers? They moved as one. A businessman stood first, stepping into the aisle. "We'll protect him. You're not touching him again." A middle-aged woman followed, her carry-on rolling into place like a barricade. "You called him a fraud in front of all of us. That ends here." The teenager with the live stream swung her phone to capture the scene. "You're watching this, we're standing with Marcus Carter, Horizon's own CEO. They tried to drag him out, but we're not letting it happen." Comments flooded in. Powerful. Chills. Witnessing history. Row by row, passengers leaned forward, rising, their bodies forming a loose circle around Marcus. Not ordered, not planned, but undeniable a human shield. The security officers glanced at each other, then stepped back, palms open. They weren't intervening anymore. They knew better. The lead attendant tried one last gasp, her voice brittle. "Please, sit down. You're endangering the flight." But the words rang hollow. A man shot back, "The danger was you." "Oh." Cheers followed, a ripple of defiance filling the cabin. Marcus stood at the center, still calm, still steady. He hadn't asked for their protection. He didn't need to. But the sight of it, the crowd rising, forming around him, spoke louder than any command he could have given. He let the moment breathe, then spoke low, clear, the way a judge might address a courtroom. "You thought I was alone, I never was. Justice never island." Phones caught the line instantly. Passengers gasped, some clapping, some whispering. "That's the quote. That's the one." The lead attendant covered her mouth, tears welling. The captain stared at the floor. Their power was gone. Their careers were gone, and everyone in that cabin knew it. The applause surged again, louder than takeoff engines, shaking the narrow walls with the sound of collective judgment. And Marcus Carter stood in the center, the quiet storm that had turned an entire cabin into a chorus of truth. The roar of applause lingered, then softened into a tense silence. All eyes returned to Marcus Carter. He stood in the aisle, phone in hand, calm as ever. The crew, shaking, pale, powerless, waited for a mercy that wasn't coming. Marcus lifted the phone once more. His words were steady, unhurried. "Rachel, execute final termination. Effective immediately." The line was quiet for half a breath. Then Rachel's voice came crisp and cutting, amplified by the speaker so everyone could hear. Confirmed. Horizon crew IDs for flight Lobe Arshasan revoked. System lock engaged. The response was instant. The captain's tablet blinked red. His flight log access vanished. The lead attendant's handheld chimed. Screen flashing, access denied. Another crew member near the galley gasped as her badge went cold in her hand, the green light extinguished forever. A ripple of disbelief swept the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, whispering like witnesses to a miracle. He really fired them. Right here, mid-flight. The live stream chat exploded across thousands of screens. He shut them down live. Justice on board. The lead attendant staggered back, her voice breaking. Please, this is my career. Don't do this. Marcus's gaze stayed level. You ended your career the moment you tore up my ticket and called me a fraud. I'm not taking your job. You threw it away. I do. The captain stepped forward, his voice desperate. Mr. Carter, reconsider. Years of service. Marcus cut him off, calm but final. Years of service don't erase minutes of prejudice. The cabin erupted in gasps, then applause. A businessman shouted, "Say it again." Passengers clapped harder, phones recording every word. The young attendant by the galley who had spoken earlier looked down at her trembling hands. Her voice cracked. I can't defend this. Not anymore. Marcus regarded her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. Courage comes late, but it still matters. Her eyes welled with tears. The passengers applauded again, not just for Marcus this time, but for her small act of truth. The lead attendant collapsed into a seat, head in her hands. The captain stared at the floor, his authority stripped bare, and Marcus Carter stood tall in the aisle, phone at his side, justice delivered without raising his voice. The cabin wasn't just a plane anymore. It was a tribunal at 30,000 feet, and the verdict had been rendered. The cabin was silent now. No more protests, no more excuses. The flight crew, once certain, once untouchable, sat stripped of power, their badges blinking red like warning lights of a storm already past. Every passenger leaned forward, phones still recording, waiting for the man in seat 2 amperes to speak. The air hummed with anticipation, the kind that comes before a verdict. Marcus Carter didn't rush. He looked slowly around the cabin, his gaze resting on faces, some shocked, some smiling, some still trembling with disbelief. Then his voice came, low, deliberate, each word weighted. You thought the problem was my seat, but the real problem was your prejudice, and that's what just cost you your careers. Gasps broke, followed by a rolling wave of applause. Some passengers cheered outright, clapping until their hands stung. The live stream captured it all, comments flooding in like wildfire. Powerful, legendary, silent justice. This is history. Marcus let the noise swell, then raised a hand. The cabin quieted again, hanging on the gravity in his tone. I don't need revenge, he continued, steady as steel. I don't need to raise my voice, because justice doesn't shout, it stands. Phones caught the line instantly, passengers whispering, that's it, that's the quote. The captain lifted his head, eyes hollow. What happens now? He asked, voice barely audible. Marcus turned slightly, his words final, echoing across the narrow cabin like a gavel. What happens now is simple. You leave this aircraft as passengers, not as crew. And you carry this with you not as shame, but as a reminder, because power isn't uniforms or badges or policy. Power is integrity, and without it, you have nothing. Silence followed, a silence so deep it pressed against the walls. Then applause again, not frantic but steady, a chorus of affirmation. Marcus lowered himself back into seat 2 amperes, calm as if nothing had happened. He placed his phone face down on the armrest and closed his eyes. The cabin wasn't just calm now. It was reverent. Witnesses knew they had seen something rare. Not rage, not spectacle, but dignity made visible. And as the engines roared, carrying Horizon Flight 623 higher into the sky, every passenger understood the truth. This wasn't just a flight. It was a lesson.